And we're back for the first time in 8 days, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Thursday morning here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz, get right to the guts of the episode. So, it's not that I didn't have any ideas for episodes or that I just suddenly blanked, but I don't know, I've done a lot of work, I've been busy, more busy than I usually am, for whatever that's worth, of late, and had a couple of days I wasn't feeling well, that I was going to do episodes, I just kind of couldn't muster up the intestinal fortitude to actually even start an episode, let alone complete one. And I don't like to have to always pause and double check to make sure that certain things are accurate. I like to, as much as possible, as you know, be off the cuff and just kind of let you have it, so to speak, and then, then call it a day. So I really haven't had the opportunity to, or feel well enough or comfortable enough to just let it rip. But this morning, I'm energetic, even though I didn't get nearly enough sleep, and I want to talk about the fifth and final Dirty Harry film, The Deadpool. So, I've discussed the original Dirty Harry on numerous occasions, but I hadn't actually gone into detail on my thoughts of the second film, which is Magnum Force, the third film, The Enforcer, the fourth film, Sudden Impact. So I did episodes on all of those within the last 2 months, I guess. And now I want to talk about the final film in the series, which I have mentioned on a number of occasions for various reasons, but haven't actually explored how I see it in relation to the other films, and if you want to say, in relation to Clint Eastwood's career as a whole, and some of the other people who weren't that famous at the time, who have ended up having big careers since then. So, The Deadpool, to me, is the second best film in the series. And it's a little bit of a hot take, a controversial take, because generally speaking, almost everybody has the original Dirty Harry, as I do, as the best film of the five. It's pretty much unquestioned. You might get a few people here or there that throw one in there and say, no, Sudden Impact is the best, or whatever. Nobody's going to say The Enforcer is the best. That, I'm going to go down on that hill. I have not met nor talked to anybody who has The Enforcer as high as even 2. I would say that it's either 4th or 5th as far as effectiveness. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie, it's just the quality is not the quality of the other films, even ones that you might consider to be weaker. The Deadpool, though, is an interesting historical document outside of, okay, it's the last Dirty Harry film, you have a kind of an older Callahan. Is he more cool and reflective? Does he still have a really itchy trigger finger? Is he ready with a wisecrack? Because Clint was well into his 50s. When the Deadpool was made, he would have been 57, going on 58. And Arnold, his buddy, and Stallone, and Chuck Norris, and Van Damme, and Steven Seagal, by this point in time, those guys, their careers had either just begun, or their careers were already ascending big time in the case of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the idea was that, did Clint need to do something else? And the ultimate box office failure of the Deadpool, was it because people were tired of this character, people were tired of Clint playing this character, or was it kind of a victim of circumstance? It happened to come out at the wrong time in 1988, and that's why it didn't find an audience. I actually think that that's the reason why it didn't find an audience. But when I talk about the film as a historical document, you have 3 people in this cast who, well, one of them was somewhat known, and 2 of them were largely unknown, at least among mainstream audiences. Now, the one person who was somewhat known is Liam Neeson. Now, Liam Neeson had been in a number of movies in the mid-'80s, and he had been on Miami Vice, but he had a reputation as obviously a very distinctive, very attractive guy, and somebody who was versatile, and he was on the way up. People knew who he was within the business, and he was on the way up. And he plays the critical supporting character of a schlock horror filmmaker named Peter Swan, who some people think is a serial killer. There's this sick game going on called The Deadpool, hence why the movie is titled The Deadpool, where members of San Francisco society at various levels have this sort of informal list of celebrities or somewhat well-known people who are just not going to make it for one reason or another. Either they're old or they're in a dangerous profession like police work. And so Liam Neeson plays this filmmaker named Peter Swan, and he and Harry Callahan clash, and it appears the movie is setting up a showdown between these two guys of some sort, but it turns out that it becomes clear early on this guy is actually not the killer. He just happens to be probably an asshole who decided to make his own Deadpool list, but it doesn't mean that he necessarily has done anything wrong other than that, if you even want to argue that that is something wrong. Another person in the cast who was pretty much unknown at this time, playing a telejournalist, a reporter, is Patricia Clarkson. And she is in the category of people where you know who she is, but the name might not ring a bell. I want to say she was nominated for Supporting Actress Oscar for Pieces of April, the film with Katie Holmes, which I thought was really, really good. Way better than it looked like it was going to be. That was in 2003. And her performance here springboarded her to bigger and better things. Because honestly, the role that she plays, it's a nothing on the page. You know, the hot reporter who tries to get the story and then gets more than she bargained for. Maybe she'll get bumped off. Maybe she'll be on someone else's Deadpool. And maybe Harry Callahan will successfully not do an interview, but maybe he'll be able to separate her from her clothing, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just as good or better. The third and final major player in Hollywood who is on the rise is Jim Carrey. And Jim Carrey has long talked about the fact that Clint Eastwood is on the list of people who really helped his career. Somebody who believed in him, and at first it was just that he thought the kid was a riot. But Clint saw something other than just that. And when he cast him in the Deadpool, it was on the strength of that somebody had handed Clint a tape, a VHS tape of some of Jim's early stand-up, and probably a demo reel from the movie that he did called Once Bitten, where he plays a high school senior who is seemingly turning into a vampire thanks to a bite from Lauren Hutton, who had been a fashion model and a kind of an older model, and there's a little bit of a kind of almost parallel story, if you know who Lauren Hutton is, that she's a vampire who is a little bit up there in years, and she needs to feed on the blood of young male virgins in order to maintain her youthfulness. And again, it's a very meta film, whether or not the filmmakers were intending it to be. But Jim Carrey impressed the hell out of Clint Eastwood. Clint even joked around and said, you know, he said in later years, I used to show people your tape. And Jim Carrey even did a Clint Eastwood impersonation at the AFI when he presented him with an award, and he basically said, yeah, Clint said he showed my tape to almost everybody. I show it to all my friends. But Jim Carrey was a comic. He was a comic actor and a stand-up comedian from Canada who had come to the States in 1984, made an early appearance on Carson, and impressed the hell not only out of the audience, who seemed bewildered when he started to do his shtick at the beginning, and then were just laughing their asses off, Johnny Carson himself. Quite clearly, you could see he knew that whoever this is, this kid's different. He's got something going on here. I don't know what it is, but Johnny did one of those and said the word wow a couple of times. He was really impressed. But there was nothing to indicate that he could play the role of a drugged out rock star who is probably going to meet an untimely end. But Clint saw something, maybe, you know, the kind of open face, and it doesn't look like he would be a drugged out rocker. We don't know what goes through the thought process of a filmmaker. But he got in touch, presumably, with Jim Carrey's agent, or maybe he already had his number. I don't know that part of it. Would you like to play this role? It'll be a kind of it ended up being a Guns N' Roses song, Welcome to the Jungle. I don't know if at the point that Jim Carrey was cast, if Guns N' Roses had already worked on that, or whether they knew that the song was going to be used in this film. Also, that is not known. But Jim Carrey was cast as this drugged out rocker named Johnny Squares. And I guess it could be like an Axl Rose but closer to a Johnny Rotten than Axl Rose or that kind of thing. But the role is not that, the character's not in that much of the movie. I guess that's a little bit of a spoiler. And the character originally was not intended to even have as many lines or as big of a presence in the script. The thing with Clint Eastwood, you know, he's 95, he's going to be 96 very, very soon, like about 8 days from now, 9 days from now. But he's not, and was never an old fogey. He was always somebody who wanted to collaborate with his performers when he was behind the camera, and obviously in front of the camera. So you imagine, and Jim Carrey also told this story, he's a young actor, a young comic trying to break into mainstream films at a higher level than Once Bitten, which was, I mean, it's a very entertaining movie, it's a guilty pleasure movie, but it didn't exactly set the world on fire. So he had some ideas, and he was nervous. Do I really? I mean, Clint Eastwood went out of his way to hire me. Maybe I should just keep my mouth shut. But he went up to him before they were going to begin shooting the scene and said something like, Mr. Eastwood, I have some ideas. Can I run them by you? And, you know, okay. Because we know that Clint Eastwood does not like to do more than 2 takes of any setup. That's his thing. He just doesn't want to waste everybody's time. So Jim Carrey goes over what he wants to do with Clint. And he's thinking, he's just glad-handing because Clint's nodding his head. But he actually was listening to what Jim Carrey said. And maybe he thought most of his ideas were nonsense, it's not going to work, this is stupid, but he didn't say that. He turned to his director of photography. I don't know if it was Jack N. Green, who he worked with a bunch of times, ended up working on Unforgiven 4 years later. But he said something to the effect of, maybe we should just turn the camera on and let the kid go. Maybe we should just turn the camera and just let him go. Just see what he comes up with. And he came up with enough material that Clint felt was useful for this film, and not like in a comedic vein where maybe we'll get some laughs just by having this not funny character do stupid shit. No, didn't do that. So Jim's performance, his character, is very important to the setup of the story, the idea of this Deadpool. Because a drugged out rocker in and out of rehab, that's the kind of character that you might have on a Deadpool. So, Patricia Clarkson, Liam Neeson, Jim Carrey, in significant supporting roles in this film. And tone-wise, it's the closest to the original Dirty Harry. And what I mean from a stylistic standpoint is that the movie is shot almost like a film noir. And the reality of the original Dirty Harry, there are sequences and long stretches of the original Dirty Harry where it feels like noir. Even though it is essentially a cop thriller, it is an action thriller, it is an R-rated, balls-out action movie. But Don Siegel was very particular in how he lit it and how he chose to shoot shadows and light, and the contrast between shadows and light, darkness and light, the human soul, good, evil, somewhere in between. Because you can argue that the original Dirty Harry, in the immortal words of Tom Cruise in Night and Day, there are good guys, there are bad guys, and then there are worse guys. And Dirty Harry encourages you to, well, who's who? Is Scorpio the worst guy? Is Harry a bad guy? Is the good guy the government? Is the system the worst guy? It's all how you decide and how you perceive the film yourself. Another thing that's great about Dirty Harry, it can be interpreted almost any way. It's how the movie hits you. The Deadpool is a more straightforward story, though, than Dirty Harry. There's less element of mystery, even with the noir elements. And there's really a lot of clever stuff in the film where the Deadpool killer has this kind of, you could say it was ahead of its time. He has like a drone-type technology that he's working with, where he is able to radio control explosives. I won't go any further, but he's able to radio control explosives in a fashion that we had never seen before in a movie, and obviously you're not going to do the same thing now. There have been similar notions put forth, but not necessarily copied this. This certainly gave inspiration to, certain mad bombers in movies of the 90s, whether it's Dennis Hopper in Speed or even Tommy Lee Jones from the same year in Blown Away. But Clint's Harry Callahan seems calmer in this film. He's not as angry as he was in either The Enforcer from 1976 or especially Sudden Impact, where he walks through that movie pissed off. The entire film he's angry. In the Deadpool, he has an edge about him. He has an anger about him. But more in general, at the idea that he sees society as going to hell in a handbasket, and why are these people dying? What is this sick Deadpool game all about? And is this filmmaker involved? Or is he actually a target? Is he being used, if you'll pardon the phrase, is he being used as a prop so that we, as the San Francisco Police Department, think that he's the killer when he's actually going to be the killer's last victim? So as the threads of plot unspool, the film is an exercise in style, and more so than Sudden Impact, I would say, the film gives Harry Callahan some opportunities to be funny, even though he's not really being funny, but we laugh because it's Clint Eastwood playing this character. And similar to the original Dirty Harry, where the opening sequence of the bank robbery shootout does not impact the main plot. It is not part of the story proper, which is about a serial killer threatening the city. You pay me money or I'm just going to keep killing people. The best individual moment in the Deadpool has Harry going to prison, and I don't mean like undercover. He goes to a prison to visit a mob boss named Gennaro, who sometime in between the events of Sudden Impact and when we pick up Harry Callahan in the Deadpool, he has put this John Gotti type character behind bars. And the guy's name is Gennaro, and he has attempted to assassinate Harry Callahan on a number of occasions. And each time Harry has managed to basically kill the guys that were going to kill him. So Harry Callahan's got enough going on in the world of the story with the Deadpool situation, and he goes to visit this guy Gennaro to basically tell him, knock it off, stop fucking around here. It stops now. You know, no more attempts on my life. And the way that he gets this mob boss to stop trying to kill him is he hires this 300-pound, it would be like a Brock Lesnar kind of guy, if the guy was a hardened criminal who's got 100 felony convictions from everything from, you don't even want to know what this guy has done. So he's 3 times the size of the crime boss. And if you look at other movies, there are moments where a crime boss is in prison and he's protected. There isn't anybody that's going to protect him from this guy. They ain't going to protect him. So he uses this humongous inmate to lean on and to, without even saying anything, to intimidate the mob boss. Call up the dogs, buddy, or this guy's going to fuck you up. And he might kill you and he wouldn't even think twice about it. So you think about what you're doing trying to fuck with me. The scene is, it's not that it's played for laughs, but the way that Clint starts off almost on the defensive, and then as he kind of gets ahead of steam behind him, you see that gorilla over there? It's gold. His line readings are perfect. And he says them in a way that he knows he knew it was going to be funny and that it was going to play for audiences, and it does. And to me, it's the highlight of the film. So there is a bit of a mystery angle, but also similar to Dirty Harry and Magnum Force. It's not really a question of a whodunit. This is not a whodunit film. This is more of a why and what's the killer's process here. And there is some social commentary when we finally figure out who the killer is and why he did it. You know, there is an ongoing discussion now. There has been, people have been debating these things. What should not be in a movie? What kind of material should not be grist for TV? What topics just should not be broached? And it's not that this movie is groundbreaking, but it gets into the ideas of disposable action movies, disposable horror films where people are brutalized and butchered. And it feels like it's just for the sake of it and just to get clicks. Now it would be just to get clicks. But back then it would just be get people in seats, get fannies in seats. And the character that Liam plays in the film of Peter Swan is a schlock filmmaker who is probably capable of better, but this is what pays the bills. No judgment here. You do whatever you can. And if you look at it in more contemporary times, in my opinion, there have been a higher percentage of very high quality horror movies, which may deal with sacred cows, which may get into territory where we're all a little bit uncomfortable to be doing this in a horror movie. But you have horror films with people like Hugh Grant. I never could have imagined Hugh Grant in Heretic to do a movie like that. And obviously we saw the incredible success of Sinners with a terrific young filmmaker like Ryan Coogler and a big star and great actor in his own right in Michael B. Jordan and that kind of thing. So I feel like, not that the message of this movie is so overarching, but I feel like there are some messages that have been received, and there has, in my opinion, there has been at least an attempt to try to do better in the streaming era, where it's not a question of just put a big star, like, I hate to say Bruce Willis, but Bruce Willis, on the poster when he's only in the movie for 2 minutes in a number of films in the circa 2019 era, where you have people, even with limited budgets, trying to do something and not simply get clicks. And the Deadpool is arguing in favor of artistic expression, but maybe don't make lowest common denominator crap. Try to do a little bit better. And I feel like this film, with the suspense that it builds and the sequences of the killer attempting to exact what he's doing and almost exert his will and dominance over Harry Callahan, taunting him as he does, it doesn't wrap up the way that you're expecting. And I guess the last scene between Clint and Liam Neeson is a good one. People get older, you start to lose height when you get to a certain age. But one thing which will shock people under, let's say even under 40 who aren't familiar with this film, when you see Liam Neeson and Clint Eastwood together, you will not believe how much bigger, that's what she said, but you won't believe how much bigger Clint Eastwood was than Liam Neeson. When Clint Eastwood was at his so-called full height, he looks like he could take Liam Neeson and stuff him into a garbage can. Liam is not a small man. Clint was a big dude, and this was a point in his career where, I don't know that he was necessarily working out with Arnold, but from a physical standpoint, I think he was at his most impressive and quote-unquote biggest, because he was never really that big. But in the mid to late 1980s, you look at the way that he fills out the suit in this movie, he looks like he's 200 pounds. And it doesn't look, he looks like a football player in this film. And if you look at him in the original Dirty Harry, he looks a lot more physically intimidating in this movie. I don't think it was an accident or coincidence. If you're going to have him threaten Liam Neeson's character, he can't look like the other way around, that Liam Neeson could just, hey, fuck you, and throw him across the room. So this movie was not a box office hit, where Sudden Impact, the previous film, had been the biggest hit in the franchise. That movie has a lot of lowest common denominator stuff. This movie aims higher, and I believe it succeeds. And I don't know if Clint has discussed this movie, within the last 15 or 20 years. If he has, I missed it. But I have this as the second best film in the series. I think it's that good. And the kind of surprise of seeing Patricia Clarkson and Liam Neeson and Jim Carrey in roles of varying sizes and, amount of screen time they have. I think that he has more screen time than her, meaning Liam. And as I say, Jim's character, spoiler alert, he's not a big character once you get to about the halfway point of the film. I'm pretty sure this movie is free on Max. If not, it's probably on an app like Tubi, because I know Max, they had a thing where all the Dirty Harry films, Max, Warner Brothers, the whole thing, Clint Eastwood, Mr. Warner Brothers, he's had offices on the Warner Brothers lot since the late 1960s. This is a really good movie. And if you are somebody that has not seen any Dirty Harry films, do it in chronological order. Absolutely. This is not one of those, like a Star Wars kind of thing where, you got to do it in a different order. Just watch them chronologically and, kind of draw your own conclusion. Don't even listen to what I'm telling you. Maybe you'll think that the Deadpool is the worst film. I can't imagine that you're going to think that the Enforcer is the best, though. That would be a big upset. But if you do, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'm the one who is at sea here. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the fifth and final Dirty Harry film, which was released in the summer of 1988 as Bruce Willis was tearing up Nakatomi Plaza in the original Die Hard. And what was Arnold doing? Arnold was getting ready. Twins, I don't think Twins had come out yet when the Deadpool opened. And Stallone in 88, Stallone had Rambo 3. So the big guys of the era, Steven Seagal, Above the Law, was also 1988. And Kickboxer, Van Damme was working on Kickboxer at this point in time. But Bloodsport, I'm pretty sure Bloodsport was 1988, and that was Jean-Claude's kind of first big foray into action. So whatever they were trying to do with the Deadpool, I believe they succeeded admirably, and audiences just didn't come out in large enough numbers. And a number of years ago, like even 2 decades ago, when Clint was working on Gran Torino, and he did an appearance on Letterman to promote the second part of his World War II epic, the first being Flags of Our Fathers, the second being Letters from Iwo Jima, Letterman asked Clint, he said, there are rumors, please don't take this the wrong way, I love you, but there are rumors that you're working on a 6th Dirty Harry film. Somebody had seen a Gran Torino and Clint Eastwood, and he was like scouting locations, and he thought he was making another Dirty Harry film, but he actually was in preparation for what became Gran Torino. Anyway, enough rambling. I am a huge fan of the fifth and final Dirty Harry film, The Deadpool, which, as I say, is readily available on streaming. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you let me know what you think of my thoughts on all 5 films if you have the time to check out the other episodes in the series. I'll spare you the exaggerated wrap-up. Feels good to record my first episode in 8 days, and I hope you all have a fantastic Thursday. Peace.